Alright, everyone, now let's move into tools for these times. And tonight's topic connects very deeply with the conversation we've just had about authenticity, belonging, modern social pressure, and the emotional exhaustion of constantly trying to fit into environments that internally don't feel right. Because one thing that silently damages many people psychologically over time is living too disconnected from themselves. And sometimes this happens so gradually that people barely even notice it at first. That frog, frog's boiling metaphor, right? People adapt a little socially, hide certain parts of themselves, avoid saying what they really think, and act more energetic than they really feel, pretend to enjoy environments that internally exhaust them, have to smile constantly or perform constantly. And eventually, some people wake up emotionally feeling empty, alienated, disconnected, or strangely lonely even while surrounded by others. So, tonight's first song representing this emotional state, the, the problem, depicting the problem, the song I chose is Mad World by Tears for Fears. And this song perfectly captures emotional alienation. The atmosphere alone already feels detached and mechanical and socially exhausted. And let's have a look to the lyrics. It says, I went to school and I was very nervous. No one knew me, no one knew me. And that line captures something many people experience psychologically. Being physically present socially while internally feeling unseen. And then there's this other incredibly powerful line at the song that says, "The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I ever had." And that lyric feels emotionally extreme on the surface, but psychologically, I think it reflects something deeper. That emotional exhaustion with a world that increasingly feels artificial or disconnected from genuine human needs. And many people today silently move through routines feeling socially functional but emotionally detached from themselves. And one dangerous thing about constantly trying to fit in everywhere is that eventually people stop knowing what they genuinely enjoy, what they truly value, or who they naturally are outside this constant social performance. And psychologically, that creates chronic internal tension. But now, before continuing, this does not mean things as reject society, avoid people, or isolate yourself completely forever in the middle of the forest. Because human beings absolutely still need connection, friendship, community, love, and shared experiences. The problem is not social connection itself. The problem is feeling forced to permanently perform a version of yourself that internally feels emotionally false. So let's have a look to the solution. What is the song that will remind us to apply a kind of technique to trick our own minds not to fall into these patterns of thinking? And that's why tonight's second song is True Colors by Cyndi Lauper. And this song feels emotionally comforting almost immediately. And let's have a look to the lyric. Your true colors are beautiful like a rainbow. And another very important line over here is don't be afraid to let them show. I think that message becomes more psychologically important in modern society and not less, because modern life increasingly pressures people toward uniformity, performance, branding yourself to towards visibility and social optimization on a permanent basis. And many people become terrified of showing vulnerability, sensitivity, quietness, different values, or emotional depth. But psychologically, hiding yourself permanently creates exhaustion. So let's have a look to the practical tool that we provide here on this show and myself as a psychologist. So the practical psychological tool for today is selective authenticity. So this may be one of the healthiest balances modern people can learn, because the goal is not this kind of be your full deepest self with absolutely everybody all the time, because that's unrealistic. The goal here is slowly creating more spaces in life where you can exist more honestly. So let's have a look to practical examples. Sometimes this begins with surprisingly small things. For example, spending more time with people who don't make you feel emotionally fake, allowing yourself quieter hobbies if that's what genuinely nourishes you, uh, reducing environments that constantly drain your nervous system without feeling guilty for doing so, speaking more honestly about your real interest without fear of rejection, listening to music that reconnects you emotionally with yourself through the wonderful songs that we cover here in RetroLovers Radio. And sometimes people don't need to completely change their lives immediately. Sometimes they simply need a few emotionally safe spaces where they can breathe again psychologically. So this may be one reason older music still emotionally helps so many people, because many artists from the 80s and 90s openly expressed melancholy, sensitivity, loneliness, reflection, vulnerability, and emotional individuality. And listeners realized I'm not the only person who feels differently or different internally. So let's remember together the memory trick to remember how to tackle our own mind when falling into these states. So instead of remembering complicated psychological terminology, like I mentioned, remember these two songs and you're going to remember better. Remember Mad War by Tears for Fears as the warning sign. Living too disconnected from yourself while trying to survive socially, feeling the pressure to fit in an environment that makes you feel not authentic. And then remember True Colors by Cyndi Lauper as the reminder that you have to stop doing that and returning to yourself. So gradually allowing more of your authentic self to exist again. So the first song represents emotional alienation through conformity. while the second song represents emotional safety through authenticity. So I would like to know what's one place or hobby or situation where you feel most naturally yourself without needing to perform socially. And those spaces matter psychologically much more than people sometimes realize. Because modern life absolutely pressures people to adapt constantly. That's real. But psychologically, human beings still need places where they feel emotionally genuine. And sometimes peace begins not when you finally impress everybody, but when you stop abandoning yourself internally just to belong everywhere. And music can sometimes help remind people of that. Alright, everyone, that was tonight's segment Tools for These Times.